I'm just giving you my best guess. I got to believe that the NFL, for PR reasons, has to take some sort of an action. I suppose one game would make sense also. My gut reaction, based on the fact that Adams was clearly not happy and the fact that he effectively initiated the contact, leads me to conclude that I think 2 games is more likely. And that's just an opinion.
And don't you think, based on Mike Evans getting suspended 1 game with an altercation with a player, that, and this is what someone said on the live stream last night, and to me, it's the best way to paint this picture, in my opinion, is like, how do they not give Adams at least a game for shoving a worker on the field?
Take a lap.
Hey, Tony, it's Smitty. What's up, my man?
Smitty, how are you, brother?
I'm good. I'm glad you called me back. I appreciate it, and wanted to talk about Davante Adams with you briefly. And you're live on the Fantasy Football Show, by the way.
Okay.
And so we can't predict the NFL, right? The NFL can do what they want. They obviously are inconsistent. You and I have talked about this at very, very great length. And for those that don't know, this is Tony, the attorney, on the phone right now. They have a heavy hand. I think you even said this, that Goodell's got a heavy hand one moment. He's got a light hand the other moment. It's not consistent from Ridley to what's happened with Deshaun Watson to what's potentially happening and not happening with Alvin Kamara. You had said on the live stream a minute ago, or probably a half hour ago, that you believe that this was a battery, obviously, and that Adams is probably looking at a 2-game suspension based on your educated guesswork. Can you elaborate on that for everybody that's listening right now?
Well, sure. I was just sort of reacting to the question of whether or not this was in fact a criminal act. It clearly is, believe it or not. Adams will probably try to argue that the reporter, I don't know the guy's name, was in a position that was unprivileged. In other words, he shouldn't have been there. Of course, the problem is that the reporters unequivocally got a press pass and was in a position where press are often located, especially during the end of a game. They're trying to catch video or photos of guys walking off the field. So there's no question that the reporter had a right to be where he was. Adams will also probably try to argue that this was an incidental kind of a contact. But in the eyes of the law, that's not really relevant. The bottom line is that he had an opportunity, meaning Adams, had an opportunity to avoid an unconsented physical contact with this gentleman and chose instead to just push the guy out of the way. And when you watch the video, it's apparent from Adams's body language, in other words, his attitude, after the contact with this individual, that he was unhappy that the guy was in the way. So there's no question that it's criminal. The question then becomes, does the reporter push the local law enforcement to go forward? Based on the fact that a bench warrant was issued, it would appear that that's the case. Now, the guy could, of course, always back off, especially if Adams makes some sort of an offer to resolve any civil claim. But there's no question that this incident would give rise to comparatively minor, both criminal and civil liability for Mr. Adams. Now, having said all that, whatever happens legally, as we discussed before, the NFL is all about PR. The legal aspect is certainly relevant, but it's not singularly determinative. The NFL wants to send the message that we're not going to allow our players to get into physical altercations or events, especially with fans and or observers. Now, I'm just giving you my best guess. I got to believe that the NFL, for PR reasons, has to take some sort of an action. I suppose one game would make sense also. My gut reaction, based on the fact that Adams was clearly not happy and the fact that he effectively initiated the contact, leads me to conclude that I think 2 games is more likely. And that's just an opinion.
And don't you think, based on Mike Evans getting suspended 1 game with an altercation with a player, and this is what someone said on the live stream last night, and to me, it's the best way to paint this picture, in my opinion, is like, how do they not give Adams at least a game for shoving a worker on the field? And I don't care if, like you said, I don't care if he's in the way. I don't care if it was dumb for him to cross over. Like, it was still uncalled for. And the question is, would another player have done that? Would a handful of players have done that on the field, or is this just Adams? Is it just a certain personality type, a diva wide receiver? Just upset. I get he's frustrated at the end of the game, but it doesn't excuse it. My guess is that it's going to be a 1-game suspension. I said that right after, and a lot of people said slap on the wrist is going to be fine. But I just think that the NFL needs a W right now. I'm not saying this is a W. I just think they may think it's a W. They may think, okay, we can't control a lot of the things happening around the league right now, but this one we can. And honestly, I understand people's need and desire to defend Adams because psychologically they can't handle the fact that if they own this guy, he's going to miss a game after the bye week and have 2 weeks in a row where he won't play. But from a human perspective, you can't allow a player to do this and just walk away with a slap on the wrist. You got to do something that's impacting more than just a fine, because you can't allow this. This is like back in the NBA when the players attack the fans in the stands, and like, you have to come down hardcore on something like this, or you're opening the door to a PR nightmare. So I think you're right. I think it's all PR driven. Goodell's hard to predict, though. It wouldn't shock me if he didn't suspend him, but I think I'd be more shocked of him not getting a 1 game at least than the other way around.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, based on what I've already said, the one variable here is you got to keep in mind that in the fairly recent past, the NFL has officially taken the position that when there are legal proceedings, they will let the legal proceedings play out before they take specific disciplinary action. Given the date and the fact that we're already in week 6, it's possible that the criminal matter at least may not even get before the court until near the end of the season. And if the NFL chooses to follow that path, it's possible that any suspension would be next year. So that is one variable that the listeners should probably keep in mind.
Yeah, you know what I think, though? I think the they may take that stance for the end result, like determination, like of discipline and suspension. I believe the NFL will look at this as regardless of how that plays out, we'll address that when it comes. He needs to be suspended right now as a way of showing this isn't going to, they can, I think definitely in the civil matters, like if there's a civil claim outside of the NFL, like, you know what I mean? Like if there's a accusation of this and it has nothing to do with play or being on the field. This was on the field. This is action that took place during a game or at the end of the game. Therefore, I don't think it's something that the NFL would wait on like they would if it was a peripheral type of situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's possible. All I'm saying is that has not been their position in the recent past. So I'm just throwing out a variable that the listeners might want to know. Yeah, that's all.
So the fantasy question here is if you've got 5 wins, if you've got 4 wins right now, and he's looking at a potential 1-game suspension on top of a bye week, which is very painful for a fantasy owner to be looking at. If they're like the 2-win team, a 3-win team, he's a good go get. Because if you can wait through those 2 weeks, the bye week and the potential suspended week, I mean, he come back on a tear for you and be a phenomenal go get on the cheap. But
Yeah, I mean, to the extent you care about my opinion, yeah, I agree. I mean, in fact, from my perspective, doesn't it sort of feel like Adams is like on the edge of really exploding? That 48-yard touchdown. Yeah. Near the end of the game, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he had an explosion in itself in that game. So I think he's definitely in the midst of an explosion. Who knows what this does to the team? If they lose him for a game and they lose a game, what's that going to do to the? I don't know. We'll have to play it by ear. But I do appreciate you clarifying it. And do you think that this is something that I guess my last question to you would be this. Typically, these things, they don't go down the criminal track. if the civil track is resolved, or they don't always, I guess. Do you think, yeah, do you think that even if, let's say, the Adams and the guy settle on some sort of monetary, settlement value, that the criminal stuff goes away? Because I think it's important for the listeners to understand that there may be two separate cases here. Civil, which is for the money, and then criminal for the assault. If he decided to not press charges, would this go away based on that civil settlement, is I guess what everybody would want to know. As far as the legal stuff. As far as the legal.
Yeah. Legally, you can't directly link the two, because at least from the lawyer's perspective, it's an ethical violation to directly link a civil settlement with dropping a criminal matter. Little known fact about the law. But in reality, if there is some sort of a civil claim, and the civil claim is unequivocally resolved, especially if it's resolved quickly, the odds are that the victim, in this case the reporter, would be much less inclined, certainly less incentive to push the prosecutor to go forward with the criminal matter. And a lot of times that plays a big part in the prosecuting attorney's decision whether or not to pursue it. And let's keep in mind, let's not overstate any of this. This is obviously an extremely minor criminal matter.
Right.
The guy, as far as I know, wasn't even hurt. He pushed him. The guy fell down. There was no obvious intent to cause direct material physical harm. This is not a big deal. But right. Is it the kind of thing that technically is a crime? Yes, it is technically. And I mean, this may sound moderately humorous, but you have to presume that the reporter is somehow connected to the Kansas City organization. Mm-hmm. And does anyone wonder whether people in Kansas City are somewhat disinclined to like people who root for the Raiders?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. It's the Raiders and Chiefs. They hate each other.
Yeah.
So, maybe the guy will want to push this just because Adams happens to be a Raider.
Yeah. We'll see how it shakes out. We'll see how it shakes out. I definitely want everybody to know that I don't think it's a big assault or any kind of crime. But I'm here to break down what I think the NFL will do and what they'll think. But I mean, it is crazy. We live in a world now where something like this can't happen without these kind of ramifications. I mean, back in the day, there wouldn't even be a second thought. This would have been like, oh, he said sorry, here's an autographed ball. Yeah, and you go on your merry way. But this guy's wanting to literally now live in Hawaii. He probably retire or he's well on his way.
Well, I mean, you have to look at the context. You look at what the NFL just went through with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
In my opinion, they cannot afford to allow a precedent to stand where a player has physical contact with a non-player, a fan, and arguably commits a battery on that person, and then the NFL says, well, yeah, that's okay, don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. That is a very bad precedent to set, and that's why I think that he has to get at least one game, and why I think 2 games is not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, the NFL cannot allow this to just stand.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with everybody saying it's not a big deal. The guy didn't get hurt, but even he could have got hurt. What if he, it could have been worse. They can't allow this to even happen so that it doesn't create a bigger problem later. So I agree with you. You got to take a stand. So one game, we'll see. Tony, appreciate you calling in.
All right, buddy.
And appreciate your super chat as well.
Love your show, buddy. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, call in anytime, man.
All right, man. Be good.
Tony, the attorney.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.